you are watching Global Insight on Voice of Canada, and this is Sana Haroon. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has brushed aside new sanctions from Canada, the US and UK as more citizens speak up against the autocratic leaders.
A burst of scornful bravado from the authoritarian leader of Belarus in the face of fresh sanctions against his country. When the UK was the first to announce the new sanctions, Alexander Lukashenko said it could choke on them. Last year, tens of thousands protested. Now, even indirect criticism of the state is dangerous. Belarusian Olympic sprinter Kristina Tsimonskaya defected last week after she faced reprisal for criticizing her country's management of its Olympic program, run by Lukashenko's son. Other athletes have been openly part of the opposition movement for months now, like this former basketball star, Belarus for fear of arrest. But leaving the country is no guarantee of safety. Last week, a Belarusian exile helping others flee persecution was found dead in a park near his home in Kiev, Ukraine. In May, Belarus brazenly hijacked a commercial flight to arrest a journalist and his girlfriend, still in jail. Opposition leaders say it will take more pressure from the outside to bring down Lukashenko.
There are fears the Taliban will seize Afghanistan's capital in the days ahead as militants sweep the country following the total withdrawal of US troops.
As the world watches in shock, Taliban soldiers are taking control of Afghanistan with lightning speed. The militants are adding to their ranks, freeing Taliban prisoners in several cities. Aid workers are warning of a humanitarian crisis as Afghans flee to Kabul. Others are packing the airport, desperate to get out. Millions of women fear what will happen to them under oppressive Taliban rule.
I'm afraid of being killed. I'm totally sure that I will not survive here.
The militants are notorious for violence against women, raping and torturing those who won't live by their strict religious rules. Many believe they will be imprisoned in their homes again, stripped of all rights, education, or worse. Thousands of desperate Afghans are also crowding the border of Pakistan, begging to be let in. Abandoned by the U.S. military and its allies, some Afghan soldiers are being executed. Others are laying down their arms. Left behind, U.S. military equipment seized by the Taliban.
We are always worried about U.S. equipment that could fall into an adversary's hands.
5,000 members of the U.S. military are rushing to Kabul temporarily to evacuate embassy staff. President Joe Biden left Washington for Camp David this weekend, staying publicly silent about the crisis while being briefed by national security and military leaders. But others are speaking out, including soldiers who fought to protect Afghanistan from extremists. Now, President Biden is sticking to his decision to withdraw U.S. troops by the end of the month, believing the war had gone on too long and cost too many American lives. But he is under increasing pressure to do something before it's too late.
Canada is home to nearly 2 lakh Haitian Canadians, many of whom are desperately trying to reach family in Haiti, where a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck on Saturday.
On a sunny Saturday morning, Haiti was jolted awake and into scenes of pure horror. A 7.2 magnitude earthquake hit the south of the country at about 8:30 a.m., turning many buildings to rubble and sending people running into the streets out of fear their homes could collapse. Haiti was still recovering from the powerful earthquake that struck the Caribbean nation in 2010. This one was even stronger. A community center serving the tens of thousands of Haitian expats who live in the city. She says the area of Haiti hardest hit by Saturday's quake is remote. He's been hearing from Montrealers who have not been able to reach their loved ones living near the earthquake's epicenter.
It is a stressful situation for them, of course.
Tout le monde essaye d'en savoir un peu plus.
Everyone is trying to find out more, says Jean Numagoudou, who runs a Haitian newspaper in Montreal. He's spoken to dozens of Montrealers trying to find out if friends and family members are okay.
We're gonna need the solidarity and the help of the whole Canadian society
Benjamin says a meeting is being planned with Montreal Haitian leaders to discuss what can be done to help. Premier Legault on Twitter sent his thoughts to his province's Haitian population. Mayor Valérie Plante says her heart is with Haiti and Montreal's Haitian community, the largest in Canada, and that the city will help finance relief efforts. For now, Montreal Haitians can only hope and pray, as many expect the news will get worse in the coming days.
Pope Francis called the dialogue to end the conflict in Afghanistan so that its people can live in peace, security, and reciprocal respect.
Affinché cessi il frastuono delle armi e le soluzioni possano essere trovate al tavolo del dialogo. Solo così la martoriata popolazione di quel paese, uomini, donne, anziani e bambini, potrà ritornare alle proprie case, vivere in pace e sicurezza nel pieno rispetto reciproco. Nelle scorse ore un forte terremoto si è verificato ad Haiti, provocando numerosi morti, feriti e ingenti danni materiali. Desidero esprimere la mia vicinanza a quelle care popolazioni colpite duramente dal sisma. Mentre levo al Signore la mia preghiera per le vittime, rivolgo la mia parola di incoraggiamento ai sopravvissuti, auspicati che verso di loro si muova l'interesse partecipe della comunità internazionale. La solidarietà di tutti possa lenire le conseguenze della tragedia. Preghiamo insieme la Madonna per Haiti.
Canada suspended diplomatic operations in Afghanistan and shut down its embassies in Kabul. Federal ministers announced Sunday as the Taliban advanced on the capital and residents and foreigners rushed to leave.
The safety and security of Canadian personnel is our top priority. The current situation poses serious challenges to our ability to ensure that safety and security of our mission. So as of this morning, Canadian diplomatic personnel are on their way back to Canada. We thank them for their tireless efforts to help the people of Afghanistan in their pursuit of democracy, human rights, education, health, and security. Our commitment to the people of Afghanistan, including women and girls and the LGBTQ2 communities, remains unwavering. And we will honor the sacrifices of Canadians, our armed forces, diplomats, journalists, and civil society have made over the past years. Our government has also committed to resettling up to 20,000 Afghans through the ongoing Special Immigration Measures Program. Our ongoing work to bring Afghans to safety in Canada under SIMS remains a top priority, and we will continue to work in close collaboration with partners and allies on this commitment. Ministers Garneau, Sajjan, and Mendicino will be continuing this work throughout the coming weeks. Canada firmly condemns the escalating violence. We are heartbroken at the situation the Afghan people find themselves in today. This is especially so given the sacrifices of Canadians who believed and continue to believe in the future of Afghanistan. We will continue to work with allies and the international community to ensure that those efforts were not in vain. We are committed to Afghanistan and to the Afghan people.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said on Sunday that he doesn't want the Taliban to be recognized as the Afghanistan government.
Remains very difficult, and it's clear that there is going to be, or there is going to be very shortly, a new government in Kabul, or a new political dispensation, however you want to put it. We don't want anybody bilaterally recognising the Taliban. We want a united position amongst all the like-minded, as far as we can get one, so that we do whatever we can to prevent Afghanistan lapsing back into being a breeding ground for terror. But I do appeal to all those who who have yet to make themselves known to us at the airport to come forward. But we certainly have the means at the moment to get them out. It's just a question of making sure that they're able to do it over the next few days. The UK presence has been very, very substantially reduced since 2014. The numbers of UK nationals there are not enormous. I think it's fair to say that the US decision to pull out has accelerated things, but this has been in many ways something that has been a chronicle of an event foretold. We've known for a long time that this was the way things were going. I think we've got to be realistic about the abilities of the UK or any power to impose a military solution, a combat solution in Afghanistan. What we certainly can do is work with all our partners in the region and around the world who share an interest with us in preventing Afghanistan from once again becoming a breeding ground for terror. And I think anybody in government in Kabul is going to recognise that the West, the UK, have a permanent interest in making sure that does not happen. And so we are going to use our diplomatic, our political, our overseas development aid budget leverage to make sure that we exert what pressure we can. And we will continue to do that. But I think the idea of a military or a combat solution is not the one that we should be pursuing right now. There isn't a military solution, but thanks to the efforts of the UK armed services, all the sacrifices they made, we have seen no Al-Qaeda attacks against the West for a very long time. And there are millions of girls and young women who've been educated in Afghanistan thanks to the efforts of the UK. The American government obviously has decided to take a particular course of action, and that is one that has the inevitable logical consequence that I set out in the House of Commons several weeks ago, and the situation has now evolved in exactly the direction that we said it would. We have to deal with those consequences. That's why we're taking the steps that we are over the next
Rescue efforts are still underway and Hadi after a deadly and devastating 7.2 magnitude earthquake rocked the country on Saturday. As of Sunday evening, nearly 1,300 people are confirmed dead and 5,700 others are injured in the aftermath of the disaster.
Scenes of devastation in South Haiti. Saturday's powerful 7.2 magnitude earthquake leveling areas of Lake Hai, tearing apart roads, making access to the region difficult for those trying to help. We can say that there are 1,500 homes completely destroyed and 3,000 homes damaged in the south, the country's civil protection director said Sunday. Saturday's earthquake was more intense than the catastrophic magnitude 7 quake that shook the country in 2010. That disaster claimed more than 200,000 lives, displacing more than 1 million others. Under Hayden are part of a small Canadian assessment team now on the ground in Lake Hai. Global News spoke to them during a refueling stopover en route to Haiti on Sunday morning. Deepening poverty, the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, and the political turmoil that has followed the assassination of the Haitian president this summer has created a very dangerous situation on the ground. Adding to these complications, an advancing tropical storm. Grace is forecast to bring heavy rains to the island nation Monday, with a risk of flash floods. Though the situation for thousands of Haitians injured or displaced by yet another disaster grows more serious by the day.
Thousands of Afghans rushed onto the tarmac of Kabul's international airport Monday, so desperate to escape the Taliban's capture of their country that they clung onto an American military jet as it took off.
I also urge all countries to be willing to receive Afghan refugees and refrain from any deportations.
We're just going to bring you these live and exclusive pictures here from inside the presidential palace. What you are looking at right now is Taliban fighters inside the presidential palace. This is these pictures exclusive on Al Jazeera. We've been watching them for a few moments now, milling around the lush environs of...
Addressing the security situation in Afghanistan, US President Joe Biden on Monday said that recent events prove that no amount of military force would deliver a secure Afghanistan.
My national security team and I have been closely monitoring the situation on the ground in Afghanistan and moving quickly to execute the plans we had put in place to respond to every constituency, including and contingency, including the rapid collapse we're seeing now. I'll speak more in a moment about the specific steps we're taking, but I want to remind everyone how we got here and what America's interests are in Afghanistan. We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11, 2001, and make sure al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. We did that. We severely degraded al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. We never gave up the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and we got him. That was a decade ago. Our mission in Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building. It was never supposed to be creating a unified, centralized democracy. Our only vital national interest in Afghanistan remains today what it has always been: preventing a terrorist attack on America's homeland. I've argued for many years that our mission should be narrowly focused on counterterrorism, not counterinsurgency or nation building. That's why I opposed the surge when it was proposed in 2009 when I was vice president. And that's why, as president, I'm adamant that we focus on the threats we face today in 2021, not yesterday's threats. Today, the terrorist threat has metastasized well beyond Afghanistan. Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, al-Nusra in Syria, ISIS attempting to create a caliphate in Syria and Iraq, and establishing affiliates in multiple countries in Africa and Asia. These threats warrant our attention and our resources. We conduct effective counterterrorism missions against terrorist groups in multiple countries where we don't have permanent military presence. If necessary, we'll do the same in Afghanistan. We've developed counterterrorism over-the-horizon capability that will allow us to keep our eyes firmly fixed on the direct threats to the United States and the region, and act quickly and decisively if needed. When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. And the Taliban was at its strongest militarily since 2001. The choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. It was only the cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, and lurching into the third decade of conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risk. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I would be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
Hundreds of protesters marched on the government house in Bangkok, Thailand, to demand President Prayut Chan-o-cha resign as anger mounts over the worsening COVID-19 pandemic and chaotic vaccine rollout. Thousands of Afghans desperate to leave the country thronged Kabul airport, where 5 people were killed on Monday after Taliban insurgents seized the capital, prompting the U.S. military to suspend evacuations to clear the airfield.
د نو باجو د یو دوه شپې وشپه گزاره وکړو دی ګرځي چې ګډوډي رامنځته کیږي.
درنو اوریدونکو، لکه څنګه چې تاسو په جریان کې د کار زړه د انصاري پلازمینه کې یو، دلته هم د اسلامي امارت مجاهدین فعال حضور لري. د اسلامي امارت ځانګړي قطاعت د کار د امنیت چارې په غاړه باندې لري، روان یو شیبه په شیبه باندې د ښار جاج اخلو. دلته له ښاریانو سره هم مرکې لرو چې دوی ته کوم خطر مواجه شوی ده او که نه دوی څه احساس لري. له دوی څخه یې پوښتو. یو د همدې ښار وګړی دا ځوان ده، له دوی څخه یې پوښتو. ځوانه نوم څه ده؟ حبیب الله، څنګه احساس لري؟
Donne che non riescono a entrare, non possono venire, che hanno collaborato con noi, che abbiamo fermato ostetrici, infermieri, medici che lavoravano qui, adesso sono tutti abbandonati. I nostri ospedali sono abbandonati, non c'hanno farmaci, non c'hanno medicinali, malati muoiono, bambini che non c'hanno da mangiare, bambini che la situazione è gravissima. Il 70% della popolazione sono sotto povertà, disastro totale.
Go in blinks of few days. I was a child when they were here, when they were there. Now I am an adult. I have seen how these people are. Yes, I saved US should leave the country, but why this way? At least they should come a little bit, given some time.
Rescue efforts in the aftermath of Haiti's devastating earthquake are working against the clock as tropical depression Grace approaches.
For all the loss and destruction, Haitians were able to celebrate a brief win. A woman pulled from the rubble, dazed and confused, but alive. Moments later, her son was pulled to safety. Saturday's 7.2 magnitude quake left the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere once again scrambling to stand on its own. Those on the ground say the area most affected around the town of Lekai is operating. Hospitals in the disaster zone were overwhelmed with COVID-19 cases before the quake. And to make matters worse, Tropical Depression Grace is expected to dump 100 millimeters of rain on the thousands of Haitians left homeless in the streets, which could accelerate the spread of waterborne diseases. Aid is on its way, but nothing is easy in Haiti. International organizations like World Vision have had to create a so-called air bridge. It's slow, but safe. Aid organizations run by Haitians in Canada are mobilizing their assets, but even they are hitting roadblocks in part because of political turmoil after last month's assassination of Haiti's president.
It's explosive situation.
Haiti can't seem to catch a break.
Amid the crisis ongoing in Afghanistan, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made promises of helping resettle thousands of at-risk people still inside the country.
A desperate appeal to Justin Trudeau from a former Afghan interpreter for the Canadian Special Operations Forces.
The Prime Minister, please sir, help. This is the right time to do something. I am so emotional right now. I could not express the feelings of these people to you.
The situation on the ground is dire as the Taliban hunts former interpreters, thousands of them told to drop everything and travel to Kabul for extraction to Canada. But then the embassy shut down and flights stopped. These photos show former interpreters and their families exposed and vulnerable, with the situation worsening.
And they didn't have any information and they were panicking, they were pushing each another, and I could not describe. When the people left the place, they were telling me we were ashamed that we served the Canadian forces, what they have done with us.
The Prime Minister had been criticized for promising help with no specifics or timeline. On Monday, that changed. Mr. Trudeau said Canadian troops and military aircraft are on standby in Kuwait and will fly into Kabul as soon as the airfield is secure.
Absolutely. If we can see the airfield properly secured, we will be there alongside our partners to help evacuate Afghans. But as I said, the situation right now is extremely fluid, extremely difficult.
Mere hours after Trudeau's announcement, the Americans retook control of the airfield with the help of Afghan special forces from Kandahar. Global News has learned Canadian flights and special forces are ready to resume evacuation flights as soon as the Americans grant them clearance to land. Afghanistan has dominated the election for Justin Trudeau as images of desperation and tragedy pour out of Kabul. For some, it is a reminder of the 2015 election when the image of a drowned tiny Syrian refugee boy, Alan Kurdi, caught the attention and anger of Canadians, leading then Liberal leader Justin Trudeau to promise to take more than 40,000 Syrian refugees.
Many of us fear a return to the Taliban's draconian rule as a militant Islamist group reportedly rounds up and kills people on its target list.
The scene of utter chaos at the Kabul airport is just a glimpse of the confusion and fear that is unseen throughout this country of 37 million. In Kabul, Afghans on target lists are reportedly being rounded up by the Taliban. There are fleeting images of bodies in the streets, as if in a family portrait. Taliban leaders, all men, posed in the presidential palace. This commander offered assurances Afghans need not worry that mujahideen have entered the city. The Taliban are even employing man-on-the-street interviews to calm citizens. It's very peaceful, says this man. There isn't any danger here. But the mayhem on unofficial video and the fear in the voices of Afghan women tell a different story. This student, whose identity we are concealing to protect her, worked to promote women's rights. Now she is in hiding, and her relatives in Brampton, Ontario are worried sick. The Prime Minister is promising more help from this country.
We are working very closely with the US, the UK, and other allies to establish ways in which we are going to be able to get more and more people out of Afghanistan.
For 20 years, Afghanistan modernized. Now images of women are being whitewashed. Progress wiped out in a matter of days. At the United Nations, Afghanistan's ambassador deplored what is happening.
I'm speaking for millions of Afghan girls and women who are about to lose their freedom.
But he no longer speaks for the people in power in Afghanistan. Members of the UN Security Council vowed to pressure the Taliban to respect human rights.
The world is watching. We cannot and must not abandon the people of Afghanistan.
The U.S. president is not apologizing for withdrawing American troops, but was surprised the regime so quickly abandoned the fight against the Taliban.
This did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight.
The reality on the ground now, thousands of frightened Afghans are trying to leave the country.
Keep watching Global Insights on Voice of Canada. For further updates, visit our website voiceofcanada.tv.